Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast. It's Friday evening and the Dons have failed to deliver again on the European stage. A rather drab performance that we are going to round up as, well, we expected 3 points. We got one and probably, Phil, a lot more questions.
Yeah, I think there quite rightly will be questions asked. You know, we had all the pomp and circumstance before the game. In the first half, certainly felt like we were maybe going to live up to it. And yeah, second half, wow, is probably the only way I can put it.
I mean, I don't even know if we lived up to it in the first half. I
We
thought
at least we at least scored a goal, basically, is all that amounts to.
Yeah, at least Kevin Nisbet can say he touched the ball. I remember at one point when the club tweeted a photo of him, I think, winning the ball. I felt they only did that to show that he touched the ball. And obviously there was a couple of comments on our show after the last episode with your sound, and hopefully we've got it sounding a little bit better. So we've made a change to your sound. Jimmy Talene made a change up top, and it was Kevin Nisbet that came in. Were you a bit surprised to see Nisbet given the nod, given how good Lazetic has been recently?
Yeah, a bit like my Sugarly cable that's causing issues. I thought Nisbet was on a little bit of a Sugarly peg for the most part, you know. Hadn't scored yet. I felt like when he was coming off the bench to replace Lazetic, he was really not offering us too much. And my real worry seeing him start was potentially the lack of movement, but he proved me wrong. Certainly when he was on the pitch, I thought he did show good fight and good intent. Like I say, certainly for that first half, I think the press looked a lot more cohesive
Mm-hmm.
than it did later on in the game. So, yeah, got to give him credit, and obviously took his goal very well when that chance did come. Maybe scaffed one in the second half, which if you had already scored 4 or 5 this season, might not have been the case. But yeah, certainly a better showing from Nisbet as he's put in lately.
Yeah, I suppose that I don't know. The whole game kind of felt weird. I was sitting in the main stand last night, and obviously credit to the Ultras Aberdeen for their display in the Red Shed. I know the fans project and display team had theirs in the lower deck as well. So there was a bit of a build up pre-match, but maybe the premature firework display was a sign of things to come on the pitch.
Yeah, I think, again, I think you'd put out on Twitter, and I think it was kind of right, and I think you'd said it on Sports Sound as well, that it had a weird feeling for a European game.
Mhm.
It was great seeing everything pre-match, and credit to all involved in the various groups for their displays, but just the atmosphere around Pataudry was just a very, very eerie one. I think, it maybe potentially translated to the pitch slightly. Um,
It
just
didn't have
and
the buzz of a normal European night, it felt.
no, and I think that's sometimes normal. It's a bit like cup games. You get sort of more pay-as-you-go fans, maybe
Mhm.
fans that aren't super into the football yet, and this is them dipping their toe into the water. Which unlucky if that was you dipping your toe into the water for Aberdeen Football Club. Um, so you do tend to get a different environment than me and Callum losing our heads in the South Stand at Livy at home, for example. Um, but yeah, no, you are right. There wasn't that same sort of electric atmosphere. I mean, even the march down King Street, um, I totally forgot it was even happening.
Mhm.
Um, and usually that's something that really gets everybody going. So yeah, a very odd night at Tawdry.
Yeah. Speaking of actually being in the main stand as well, I got told that the person I was sitting next to said, "Who is that noisy replacement?" So yeah, I was maybe a little bit out of place in the main stand last night, but that was one too many fancy flicks from Jesper Karlsson that tipped me just over the edge towards the end of the game. In terms of speaking about the atmosphere and the feel around the ground as well, do you think some of the comments and maybe fan expectation around the game last night, Jimmy Talene acknowledging it was a must win, the fans probably, with the greatest respects to Noah, who showed last night, I think it's fair to say, that they are no mugs on this European stage, but there was an expectation amongst the Aberdeen support that we were going to or should be getting 3 points from the game, that there was maybe a bit of an overconfidence from the fans mixed with nervousness, and that transmitted to the players a little bit in that first half.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We sort of said on the last episode that everyone probably would have circled this one on the calendar as the game that probably should be won, definitely could be won out of our European games.
And
So
needed
there,
to be one almost how it's
well,
turned out.
well, exactly, and I think like you say, I think that was kind of the expectation, stroke frustration.
Mm,
That we're now looking at potentially finishing this European campaign on 2 points, um, which and it's very much hindsight and what could have been, etc. But if you look at that Shakhtar game, the chances missed in the Larnaca game, the game
mhm.
against Noah, even the battering against Athens, kind of ruining our goal difference.
Yeah.
If everything had, if we could have just seen out a little bit more, we'd be looking at something totally different. I think I saw, the statisticians amongst us on X saying that I think 7 points is about a 75% chance of qualification. And if you think we could have been at that already had we got the win against
Mm,
Noah, taking our chances against Larnaca and got the win there and held out for the draw with Shakhtar. So, we've kind of only got ourselves to blame if this is the reason we aren't able to progress. I think it'll be a big ask to try and get, 2 wins against Strasbourg and Sparta Prague.
and I know that the draw hasn't been favourable to us. I think there was that before this round. It was 5 of the top 10 teams expected to win this tournament. We've been drawn to face, and look, you know, I suppose opposition fans will be saying, well, this is what you get for getting that rub of the green in the Scottish Cup draw last season. You were about time you got a tough draw. But equally, I think you're right to acknowledge there has been opportunities. The only one which, I mean, actually, no, we did have opportunities in Athens. That opening 20 minutes to grab a goal. The Athens game ultimately will be the one that's most costly, because even if we pull off 2 victories against Strasbourg and Sparta Prague, the goal difference could be an absolute killer. Albeit right now we struggle to score 2 goals in a game, so it's really not going to be taking too much of a hit at this stage. So that's why we aren't completely out, but it certainly feels like we are all but there. But yeah, I do think you're right to acknowledge it does feel like a huge opportunity missed, not just last night, but the campaign in general. And again, we go back to that interview that Stephen Gunn did when the team were in Portugal about how they were going to be prepared, how they'd learnt their lessons from Barry Robson's time in the group stages. I'm sorry, but I'm sitting here tonight thinking, what lessons did we learn? What was showing? Because it certainly doesn't look like it.
Yeah, and I think we'd said, I think most people had sort of alluded to the fact that that was more than likely going to come back to bite not only Stephen Gunn but the club in general. Um, and it the same as the sort of football philosophy, football principles, whatever it is, coming back and getting wheeled out every time we are on a sort of poor run. It doesn't really help the club that nobody begrudges them for setting high expectations. We set high expectations as fans, but like you say, it comes back to the whole actions speak louder than words mantra that I
Mm,
think we've peddled around before when players have came out and made bold claims in the media, then immediately gone back on them. It
yeah.
was just, I mean, last night it was just so. As soon as Noah came out that second half, there was one team that was really interested in getting something out of that game, and it didn't feel like us in the slightest.
To be honest, actually, almost as soon as we scored, it was like we got even more scared, because obviously they went straight up the other end of the pitch, got that free kick that Dimitar Mitov saves extremely well. But it felt like, yeah, as you say, there was only one team interested, and for large parts of that first half, it very much had the case of a game where both teams didn't want to lose. it was a cagey game on the pitch, and I think, as much as I'm saying I wonder how much the vibes off the pitch transmitted on it, that cagey nature very much fed into the crowd as well. And for one reason or another, I thought Noah settled better in terms of moving the ball around. Yes, we looked good in places, but I didn't feel we were overly threatening. I remember looking up at the big screen at one point in the second half, and it said we'd had 7 attempts on goal, and I was like, how many of these have I missed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of been the story of our season. I feel like we just struggle so much with creating chances in that final third. And I think it is a little bit of a hangover from that start of the season that we've had. You say that, it was a cagey game because nobody wanted to lose. I feel like not only in our front line, across the pitch, everyone is so scared to make a mistake, just on the back of how abysmal the start of this season has been at times.
Mm-hmm.
I think no one wants to be the person that, scaffs one well over the bar from the edge of the box. Nobody wants to be the one that takes the risk to try and break the line and the ball trundles out for a goal kick. But because nobody's doing that, we're just getting this horrific sideways, backwards, turgid nonsense for majority of games where you just think somebody just take a little bit of responsibility on and do something. The amount of times that Keskinen or Carlson or, even Milanovic at times would cut in and you'd be thinking, just shoot. And it was just this continual attempts to try and pass the ball into the net. And, in a game like that, we should have been testing the goalkeeper. Noah looked so nervy at times when we got our press right, when we put them under pressure, when we got bodies into the box, but we just failed to do it more than 2 or 3 times in the whole game. Even more so, like on the defensive side, we had 11 bodies in the box defending corners from them. And failed to win the first ball at any point. It just felt like they're, for every sort of glimpse of that fight and desire that we've seen in the Hearts game and, at times in the Noah game, it just still feels like nothing's quite clicking there. And it's just a team that just looks scared.
Yeah, I know you've mentioned Nicholas Milanovic there, and I know in the last episode I said, it's still a bit too early to judge. I've got a lot of judgment on him. We'll come to that, and we tend not to do these episodes scripted at all. So a lot of the time, if you see me or Phil with our heads down, if you're watching on YouTube, normally it's us writing notes for points of reference. And there's a couple of things, that you've said there, Phil, that I wanted to kind of touch on, because you mentioned obviously my appearance on Sports Sound last night and Tom English, speaking about Aberdeen needing or looking at a centre back. I think that's the last area that we need right now. It's probably the one area of the pitch I've got my least concerns. Another outstanding performance from the centre backs. To be honest, the whole defence for me, Dylan Lobban was shining again at right wing back. For me personally, I think, and I feel some of the criticism towards Alexander Jensen last night is over the top. I didn't personally feel he had a bad game. Don't know about you.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad game. I just don't like him playing at left back at all. I just feel he slows it down a bit too much. And I mean,
He's
it's
not
not
got a
just
left
him.
foot, so
Well,
that's going to
exactly. And
happen.
I think this is the thing. I mean, I was waiting to say one of my gripes across this team is it's far too one-footed at times, and it just becomes too predictable. Lobban always wants to hit the byline. Milanovic always wants to cut back in. Carlson always wants to cut back in. Nisbet always wants it on his right foot. Everything becomes so telegraphed, and Jensen's a nightmare for it because every time he gets down the byline, he turns backwards to get on his right foot, and then he just has to go backwards because he gets swamped out. And I think that was where majority of my frustration was coming from, was just slowing that attack down at times where you thought we just need a bit of urgency, a little bit to kick on. And, again, I think it comes back to the sort of questions higher up of why have we signed, Mitchell Frame? Why have we signed Emmanuel Gyamfi? What is the point in having them if we're going to continually persist to play players out of a position to fill holes? Example, Nicky Devlin at centre-half, as well as he's doing. Why are we putting Nicky Devlin in at centre-half? Why are we putting Jensen in at left-back? Why are we playing Ashish, admittedly, who played really, really well, in a deeper role? At times it just sort of square pegs, round holes once again, which I think, especially when things aren't working, they just become so much easier to highlight as points for contention.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think you're right to highlight Mitchell frame, although on his frame, I think he needs to bulk out. It is certainly some of the talk I've heard around that. Gyamfi, I think, is the obvious question mark about why he's not playing. How weak are his hamstrings, or whenever he was picking up that injury? And why are we playing players out of position? I don't think you're going to see on certainly how he started. Dylan dropped to the bench to accommodate Alexander Jensen at a right wing back. But is he the golden child, Alexander Jensen, that is almost the first name on the team sheet? Um, the other thing that kind of concerned me was the lack of leadership I felt throughout. Um, Unfortunately, the tweet that I put out about it being Thanksgiving and Dante playing on a European night extremely backfired. For as good as we've seen Dante in recent weeks, with the ball, I think it was his ball you highlighted to Topi in the win over Hearts. I was really disappointed with his performance last night. I thought the game kind of went by him. You mentioned Oshisha again. I thought he was really good, always like kind of looking for the ball. I don't know. I just didn't think it clicked for Dante last night.
Yeah, I think it was, to go down the classic commentator route, it was a game of two halves for him. I felt like the first half, personally, to me, I thought he looked really good, really positive with the ball at his feet, trying to get us forward a little bit. Again, another superb ball into the channel for Topi Keskinen to run onto, which, funnily enough, when we did go direct, it seemed to be effective. Who would have thought?
Was it not? It was Oshish with the pass for Topi this week.
Was it? I thought it was Bovara
Yeah.
again.
No, it was Oshish.
Oh well,
Only
then I
because
take
it
that
was
with
the
it.
the gloves and the short sleeve shirt that gave it away.
Ah, yes, typical baller attire
Yeah.
that. But no, I still think Dante was good in the first half. He was always willing to get on the ball in tight spaces, and then, discussing after the game with one of my pals, we were kind of saying how the second half, when that shape change comes and Noah kind of come out the traps, and Dante's not, playing with the game in front of him, he's playing with the game behind him. He really seemed to struggle, and I think that was
Mhm.
where he kind of tailed off a little bit. But I still just the midfield two pair, and I think it's just baffling. We're at this point in the season, and we still don't seem to have one that works. Which arguably, with the way that we play, is the most important area of the pitch for us, in terms of linking a quite heavily defensive side to the
Mm.
front line.
Yeah, I mean, the call in the 85th minute from the guy behind me was bring Nielsen back and that'll solve our problems, was just about enough for me last night. I forget some of the ridiculous shouts that you can hear in the main stand at times, but if we're also speaking about the front three, four, that forward area of the pitch that continues to give us problems, let alone scoring goals, but creating chances and taking them. Jimmy Tilleen spoke about the lack of calmness. Well, it felt that was evident for all to see because, as well as Kevin Nisbet takes his goal, Lazetic had a similar opportunity back to goal where he looked to turn, and I thought, take the shot. Nope, passed it. Jesper Karlsson on the edge of the box in the second half, opportunity to hit. Nope, passes to Nicky Devlin. Nicky Devlin's taking the curling shot. No one stood up and wanted to be accounted for. It was almost like our front line were scared. And speaking of scared, when you're being brought on to influence the game, enter Nicholas Milanovic, one of the worst performances I've seen of a player looking to make an impact. Spent more time running away from the ball than did running forward with the ball, and probably cursed at getting chances in injury time and failing miserably to hit the target as he did again last night.
Yeah, I've been trying to cut Milanovic a little bit of slack, he's one of those ones where maybe if he had that step in between us, he could be a really, really good winger because, on paper, he's got all the attributes to be, a very useful player to have. He just can't seem to do any of the basics, including but
Mm.
not limited to run, shoot, pass, dribble, or score. So, it makes
Don't
it
be a
quite tough.
footballer.
Basically, at the moment, yes. Um, but as well, I mean, Stuart Armstrong as well. I'm surprised that um, Milanovic ranked above him. I don't know if it's maybe just from where I was sitting and having Stuart Armstrong on the side closest to me and playing out on the left wing. But my lord, that was another absolute disaster. I've
But
got no idea what happened with him.
but as much as it's easy to sit here and criticize Nicholas Milanovic, a player that's been limited in terms of his game time at Aberdeen, Stuart Armstrong's performance was shocking. Graham Shinney getting booked before I think he'd even touched the ball. Oh, honestly,
Yeah,
these
I
are
think
your
when those subs came on, it felt like that was probably the slowest 11 that we could have possibly fielded. It just, like I say earlier, the about the coherent press when Nisbet was on, it just seemed everything went out the window as soon as the changes came. Because not only did the changes come, we then changed shape to the four at the back at one point and went for that sort of 4-3-3 with Armstrong in the 10 and Powder Puff Leighton Clarkson in the middle. Just we just had nothing of the sorts about us. The changes just killed what was already a drab game. It was just miserable viewing.
I think that's harsh on Leighton. He tries. I'll give him that. But last night, I was almost like he was trying too hard. It was that ball he tried over the top, which just about went straight out on the full. I think had one bounce before it went over the goal line. But it was before we started recording this evening. Finlay, in one of the group chats I'm in, said Leighton Clarkson spent more time being the poster boy for the games than he has probably on the pitch. And again, some of these players coming in from cold storage into these games isn't going to help. But again, Jimmy Tilleen said, well, over the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe, where these players are going to see game time. But I mean, again, I think I got asked last night if I'm enjoying watching this team, and right now the answer is no. It's not enjoyable. That second half in a must-win game was beyond frustrating. And again, little things frustrating in these moments, like how slow Tope took to walk off the pitch. Adil took to walk off the pitch. Did none of them know the importance of that game last night? Again, you spoke about the intent that Noah came out in that second half. It was almost like the goal sparked them into life. They made that immediate change. Superb goal, by the way. The ball out into the wide area, the ball into the middle, and the header. Brilliant quality. I wish we could see that more regularly from the Dons. But you said it already. There was one team interested in winning that game, and it was Noah. Once they went 1-0 down, but then almost it was like, actually, we don't need to win this game. We're now sitting on 5 points. We're in a great position. We'll let this team, who have absolutely no idea what they're doing in the final third, just continue, because really they're not troubling the goalkeeper either.
No, and I think that's been a frustrating aspect of our season. We don't challenge goalkeepers. Like I say, Noah looked nervy when they were under pressure. They looked nervy when we were, throwing bodies forward a little bit, and we just failed to do so. I mean, and I think that's kind of the frustrating thing when you look at how Jimmy had the team set up when he first came in. It felt like we were always overloading the box. There was always bodies flying forward, and we just seem to have totally lost that. And the conspiracy hat goes on of that coinciding with Amir leaving. Was he the sort of one that kind of led that kind of very quick, intense, transition attack? But
Is it also maybe down to the fact that we've had to go 5 at the back now?
potentially, but even when we went to 4 at the back, it felt like we didn't have much going forward, and that was with an entirely fresh front line. Armstrong, Lazetic, Milanovic. Okay, Carlson is still on, but the sort of 4 of them leading the attack should have been able to get themselves up the pitch quickly. But and Lazetic as well was really frustrating. I kind of tried to stand up from a little bit on the last episode on the back of Willie Miller's comments, but he was totally right. I mean, every kick that Mitov had, Milanovic was well in the Noah half, whilst Mitov was kicking into the wind. He's not the farthest kicker in the world as is, let alone in a gusty Pataudry wind. And Lazetic was nowhere to be seen to win them because, like you say, he was too busy trying to cause a fight with the centre half.
Well, there was the one where he not long after came on, obviously because I was in the main stand, it was right in front of me. He nudges, I think it must have been the left centre back to the ground, and then just turns around and just spends the next 30 seconds shouting at him, I'm sure something in Serbian, probably like, I've got your number or something like that, to try and get inside his head. But there was also another point, speaking of the ball being in the air, I don't know if it was from a meet-off kick or the ball coming forward. Lazetic was too busy looking at the defenders, and when he turned around, the ball was the other way. He was like, where's it going? Sometimes he does switch off and doesn't concentrate, but this is not a Lazetic slander. It's the whole team. They all let the fans down last night. The manager let the fans down as well. For me, last night was the first time I had serious question marks about Jimmy Tilleen. I thought listening to him pre-match, he understood the importance of the game, and that would have got through to the players. We saw, in games, this team do know how to stand up when it counts. We saw it last season when it mattered most in May. They can pull a performance out their arse. Somehow this season they just don't quite know how to do it. But between the players and the management, I was really left scratching my head and thinking, where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and with Lutz coming in, a lot of his comments about what the squad needs, it's lacking that sort of real sort of fight and players with a little bit of strength about them, and I just don't know if bringing in bodies in January is going to fix it. I mean, that I don't know what went on at halftime, but it just felt like there was no fire in the bellies. You would have thought at 1-0, you'd be wanting to put them to the sword. Okay, they were popping the ball around well at times, but
Yeah.
they weren't anything too great in that first half. And it wasn't like, okay, their goal was a sloppy goal to concede, in terms of how easy it was for them to get in behind and create that chance. But it wasn't like they were cutting us apart every attack.
Yeah.
They weren't working around our midfield and through the defence and getting one-on-one with Meatov. They were really struggling to do that. And I just feel like there was just no intensity in that second half to come out and really put them to the sword.
There was no times I thought, when we were going forward, that we had that intensity, as you said, and we looked like I was confident we were going to score. I remember the opportunity that probably hit Kevin Nisbet. I don't think he knew much about it, that goes over the bar. And there's all the other chances that we've already spoken about. Milanovic hitting the side netting. There was another opportunity. I don't know if it was that one. I've not watched the highlights back. I don't know if it was Jensen who should have probably cut it back to Lazetic, who was free in space. Again, coming back to that decision making. But the other one is Jesper Karlsson, and his step overs and insistent need to make everything a showboat reel. So frustrating, to the point, as I said in our group chat, that I think I scared the girl in front of me when I shouted, just play a simple fucking pass for once. And, I think as well, I remember towards the end of the game, he looped a high ball to the left back, and I was like, the fuck is the ball doing 30 yards in the air? You've already mentioned how windy it was last night. Just keep it on the deck. So frustrating last night. Look, there's no getting away as a quality player, but his insistent need to try and make everything quality in a game where actually probably keeping it simple would have benefited us last night was getting increasingly frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I go to the football with my dad, who's of a certain age where he is very old school. And it's one of the few things that I agree with him on. You only need to beat a man once. He has this obsession of continually trying to go past the same fullback.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's just because maybe he's not the paciest winger in the world, or what it is, but the amount of times where he drops a shoulder, he beats him, and you think, right, just hit the line, or
Yeah.
drive into the box, and he cuts back, and like you say, he does these step overs, or he does like a really obnoxious flick, which is great when it comes off. It doesn't all the time, because you're playing at Pittodrie for Aberdeen. You're not
Mm-hmm.
amongst all these technical Dutch ballers at AZ Alkmaar or all these, silky Italians at Bologna, you've kind of got to play to your assets a little bit.
Mm.
And like you say, the simple ball, we'd probably have got us at least one or two extra chances last night. And I like Carlson. I think he's a brilliant player.
There's no
But it
disputing
is
that.
that frustrating aspect. It was the same thing as what Vinny used to do.
Mm.
Vinny was quite frustrating. As good as a player as he was, when he had that first flurry in the team, he
Mm-hmm.
was frustrating to watch. Whether it
Yeah.
was the diving or, like I say, they constantly try to skin the same fullback. There are aspects where you just think, just do something with it. You're doing a whole lot of nothing really.
Yeah. And it was again. There's an opportunity, the main stand side, where a couple of step overs, dropped the shoulder and beat the man. As you said, was going towards the byline, and I thought, just whip it across the face. You've got players running in. Nope, I'll backheel it to Adil Oshish, who then stopped and kind of dinked the ball into the goalkeeper's arms. It's again, yeah, it comes back to Jimmy Tilleen's about comments around that willingness to take the ball by the scruff of the neck in that final third and someone just step up and be counted for. But yesterday it really felt like nobody wanted to do that. As I said, the game and the result definitely pose questions not only of the manager. I think it's also fair to pose questions of the players, because for me, as I've said, the lack of leadership out there was hugely frustrating. But one of the discussions we were having at work today is, was the reaction, or is the reaction potentially a little bit over the top? Because we spoke after the Hearts game about keeping this momentum, keeping this feel good factor going. And it's really strange to be speaking about a draw in Europe where, yes, you're going to get a six-figure sum off the back of. It doesn't feel like there's a feel good factor off of that result. But momentum wise, we're keeping that unbeaten run going. So is some of the reaction over the top?
Um, yes and no. It has been eye-bleeding to watch at times. I mean, even the one against Hearts, we weren't that great in
Mm,
terms of a team to watch. Um, and like you say, I think this should have been the game that we were really trying to build that sort of winner's mentality. We've beat Hearts, great. Pick up a result in Europe, great. We're still alive in that, and it just kind of keep the unbeaten run going is fine. But I think we really need to try and get in that sort of winner's mentality in a
mhm.
sense, because that is really where we need to drive things home. If we're continually just picking up a scrappy 1-0 only to go on another 4 or 5 game losing streak, it's not
Yeah.
going to do much. And I think as well, even the manner in which we're picking up the points that aren't exactly confidence instilling ways to pick up points, for the players and for the fans, and it does just make it really, really tough to get behind.
It does, and I do think, when I was asked that last night, where I stand on him, is he's probably going to be saved in inverted commas by the domestic run coming up. I know Tom English very much thinks that he's not going anywhere. The board are going to continue to back him in January. We'll come to recruitment in a second, actually, but it's one of those things where we now have to follow up the disappointment, because I think you saw the reaction of the players slumped to the ground. The fans more than made their feelings known last night. Actually, on that, do you think the booing was justified at full time?
Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a
I
tough
did.
one. I think,
I'll put my hands up and say I did.
yeah, I mean, I'm never keen on booing the team off. I think it was just a cauldron of emotion for everything, really. I think it was the fact that it felt like the effort wasn't there. The result was dreadful. The game as a whole was dreadful. And
It
it
was
is
it
really
for
the
me, it was
only way you can.
it was the performance and the effort that
Yeah,
got to me. And, you try in the stands as much as you can to encourage the team throughout the 90 minutes, and to feel that lack of effort wasn't being reciprocated was the reason for me for venting that frustration at full time.
yeah. No, I mean, like I say, everybody pays their money. I don't begrudge anyone for reacting in whatever way they want to react to for the most part. I think for me, it was more just, I think this is the problem I've got now. For me, it's just becoming so apathetical to, if
Mm.
that's even a word. There's a lot of apathy. There we go.
Yeah.
From my side, it just, like I say, it just becomes like a chore. Like yesterday, it was sort of work all day, quickly throw food down my gut, bomb it on the bus over to King Street to then
Mm.
sit and watch that, and then have to walk home in the pissing rain. It's just sort of like, what is the point? You know,
Yeah.
if we'd went and there was like you say, there was that fight, there was that drive, there was the effort from the players, and we drew 1-1, and it was just unlucky. They got a dodgy penalty, whatever it might have been. You could kind of hold your hands up and go, well, you know what, it just wasn't to be our day. But it just kind of felt
Mhm.
like it's never going to be our day if that's if like you say, if that was the must-win game and that was the level of performance that we could pull out of ourselves, when is it actually going to be our day?
Yeah, and we've seen them perform in a must-win game. Again, referencing that game back in May, that was must-win to get us to this stage. These games that we're now talking about, so they can do it. We've just not seen it at all, and I think it's really dangerous when you're coming into an extremely busy period of football, that the apathy is setting in, and you're not the only person to use the word chore to talk about going to Pataudry, and it feels mental that 13 months prior, going to Pataudry was so exciting before this slump started. And I remember Neve saying last night that she didn't even realize we're playing St Mirren next Wednesday. Games are almost being forgotten about. I'm forgetting who we're even playing at the weekend at times, having to remind myself if it's Livy away or when's that Kilmarnock game that's coming up. Football is just kind of fallen to one side because the results haven't been coming, and the entertainment value is not there right now, and it is frustrating, and it's so imperative that this weekend when we travel to Livingston, that we do pick up the 3 points, and it's going to be, people are going to say, well, you're the way you're speaking, you want to see a 3-0 Barcelona type performance, maybe, but ultimately, going back to the domestic form, the 3 points are going to be huge to get a little bit of that pressure that last night has probably been self-inflicted onto this team.
Yeah, and I mean, like I say, like I said earlier, it feels very self-inflicted in general. We've really only got ourselves to blame for the position that we find ourselves in terms of, like you say, the pressure, the chances of the European progression, the sort of stuttering league form. We can't really point the blame anywhere else. It's been on the players, it's been on the manager, it's been on the board and the recruitment. It's
The board are almost getting off scot-free at this moment in time, but that tends to happen until the manager's under serious pressure.
Yeah, and like you say, looking ahead to that January period, and whether Jimmy, does get more time, which I think he will. I think you're just not going to see as much change as people expect. We've obviously got Lutz coming in.
Mhm.
Whether they would also then want to change the manager at that point and have two people try to find their feet. At a sort of really busy point in the season. I don't know
Mm.
if that would be their plan, but um, I just don't know if signings actually fix anything in the January. Um, you know, um, as you say, Tom English spoke about a centre half on Sports Sound. David
Mhm.
Watson's name's obviously getting bandied around as being linked with Aberdeen. I believe
Mastroenice,
I
he
was about to say,
suggested.
yeah. So, but again, I just as much as I would happily take Mastroenice and David Watson, I just don't know if they fix the issues that we've got. I feel like it just goes deeper than just bringing in the players at this point. I feel like there's some sort of huge mentality issue with a lot of that squad, and I don't get it because we've seen it. There's quality players all over that team,
Mhm.
and I just don't know why we're not able to get the best out of them. It almost feels like players come to us and we effectively kill them this season for some reason. I don't know what it is. We just seem to just not be able to get the best out of any of them.
Yeah, and as do we need a David Watson when we've got a Finlay Marshall that's excelling? Do we need to go and spend that money when we can develop our own talent? I don't know. Does a Maswinise fit into our system right now? Because again, Tom English was kind of pointing him out to be a striker. He can play in that top area, but he's probably more of a winger. And as I said last night, it doesn't matter who we've got playing up front right now. The way we play right now, chuck Mbappe up there and he wouldn't score because he wouldn't be getting the service. That needs to improve, but who knows if it needs to be a formation change or a personnel change right now, but it's not working. And yeah, it's becoming, as you've already said, turgid to watch. But given our start to the season, we've almost forced ourselves into this position of grinding out ugly wins, and probably not playing the style that Jimmy Tillene wants or is maybe accustomed to as well. And I remember in one of the group chats I'm in saying that game, certainly the first half last night, could have got football stopped. Well, if you want another game that could get football stopped, Livingston Aberdeen, come on down this weekend.
Yeah, the joys of Livy away, a dreadful place to go to. Not one of my preferred away days. I enjoyed it when I lived 15 minutes away. Will not be making the trek now that I'm sort of an hour and a half, 2 hours away. God, that could be brutal. Like I say, again, it's one of those ones where you really need to cut out the traps quickly if we sort of get dragged into the game that Livy want to play and just make it this really scrappy affair. Oh, I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know what the stat line could look like come the end of that.
And look, we've already seen it this season when they came up to Pittodrie. They can make it stuffy. They frustrated Celtic for large parts at Parkhead as well by very much sitting in. Similarly at Ibrox, we don't need to recall the VAR decision that they didn't get in their favour last weekend, despite Martindale accepting an honest mistake. Of course, it was honest. But obviously, with them being at home, it's a bit of a different breed, a different opportunity for them to maybe come out and take the game to Aberdeen. And I just wonder if, the performance that we put in last night, if Martindale's maybe licking his lips and thinking, we've actually got an opportunity to hurt Aberdeen here and put a little bit of misery on them. Whereas equally, from our point of view, this has got to be the opportunity where we start putting some solid distance between ourselves and Livingston.
Yeah, I mean, we are probably becoming a bit of a target team. I think just with our jam-packed schedule, we're doing a lot of chopping and changing, a lot of tired legs at times as well. But, as has been the case this season, we're a team that, when we concede, the heads seem to go immediately down. And, Martindale's probably banking on that. If they can, nick a goal, it kind of feels like we've not got the balls to kind of come back into it. We kind of just get so dejected off the bat, and nobody looks like they're going to be able to turn that around. So yeah, it's one of those ones where it could be really nervy at times for us. And as you've already said, I think we've kind of brought that on ourselves with our failure to beat Noah. It now does become a very sort of high stakes game in terms of, trying to show that we can win. We know how to grind out games. That was just a one-off lack of concentration, but doesn't make it any better to take, really.
It doesn't, and obviously with the way maybe the fixtures play out this weekend, it does, provide an opportunity to look up the table, rather than again look behind our shoulders. But before we speak about the Aberdeen team and how we expect Aberdeen to line up, one player we can expect to see playing is Yengi, that being Tete. The news coming out this afternoon as we record this on Friday evening is Kusini Yengi looks set to leave Aberdeen in the January transfer window, with the club already doing what they can to offload the striker. I mean, that comes as very little surprise. Darren Mowbray now back into the club as in a scouting role. A couple of question marks, big question marks, will be or should be coming out around this signing. for me, the first one is, what does it mean for the future of the Portuguese Mane, whose name escapes me, that's been involved with the head of scouting? Does he still have a job? How bad is he at his job if that's who he's scouting, or approving the signing of? Because it's a signing that never made sense in the first place, and it's yet another waste of money, ultimately. And how many more could be shown the exit door after so promptly arriving at Pataudry in the summer?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very surprised if we were able to gather a fee for Cassini Yengi, to be honest. Again,
Well, we're going to have to, unless we rip up his contract, which is a frightening loss of money.
which wouldn't even surprise me at this point, because if you were another club, would you really be offering any money for Cassini Yengi at the moment? It just feels, yeah, the recruitment at times just felt very amateurish. I mean, amateurish. I know that Ashish has now started coming into a game, but you know, he was on loan at Portsmouth last season. Yengi was at Portsmouth last season. Milanovic coming in from the A League. It just feels.
And I'm not sorry on Milanovic. You know, even when we got Alan on to give us the insight, he said to us, "I can't believe we didn't get Sapsford at the same time." He thought Sapsford would be the better player. So again, question marks with what we saw within Milanovic, because he's not lived up to any sort of hype. Yeah, he looked okay against Hearts, but we've hardly seen him since.
Yeah, and I mean, even the fact that now, you know, our main links seem to be massive, and and David Watson, who argued players, it just feels like for every step forward our recruitment seems to have taken in the past few seasons, it felt like it took a really big step back this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought we were meant to be exploring all these emerging markets, and you know, we're bringing in the likes of, you know, Mitchell Frame, highly rated, not at a game. Mark Yartenson, highly rated, not at a game. Emmanuel Giamfi made a paper right off the bat. It just all,
Milanovic rated, not
yeah,
getting the game.
yeah. It just feels so just counterintuitive to how we've done things. You know, even the fact that we've got you know, the former whatever role he had, executive CEO, whatever it might have been, at Right to Dream, I believe is involved with the Aberdeen board these days, or at least he was sort of tail end of last year.
Mm-hmm.
We should be exploring all these markets that'll bring us, you know, these untapped, you know, pools of talent, instead of the same old try to sign within the league and bringing in what kind of, for the most part, feels like the cheap option.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and you know, it's not just the recruitment. There's got to be something going on behind the scenes at the club just now. You know, Robbie Hederman leaving the club, as well as commercial director. Aline Shinney's also left, with her role from the supporters engagement team, and you know, she's done such a great job over the last few seasons. I'm really not sure what's going on behind the scenes, but a lot of things off the pitch seem to be kind of brewing. I don't know, maybe I'm playing too much into that, but on the pitch, things aren't going right either. Yes, we're on this little unbeaten run, but product-wise, we're clinging on to the bare minimum. So I don't know. It feels like something's going to come to a head shortly. Obviously, as well with the news at Rangers recently, stories and talk. Will Alan Burrows leave? Don't know. There's also talk around Stephen Gunn potentially going there as well. But if, you know, Burrows goes there, his family are still down in Glasgow. Yeah, I don't know. I feel something's away to happen off the pitch. We'll see how quickly that might come to fruition or not.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that the Pataudry and Aberdeen fans can be fickle and toxic, enjoy going down to Govan, lads. That'll be a whole new kettle of fish.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking it back then on the pitch this weekend, many changes do you think that we might look at for this weekend?
Ideally 24 if we could just bring in a whole new squad. But no, I think there'll certainly be a few. I think
Are you changing that midfield too?
it's a tough one. I think not strangely enough, Polvara and Oshish seem to have looked the best in my opinion. I feel like they kind of complement each other quite well. I would maybe say for putting Clarkson in, but I just feel especially on the defensive end. I know that you said it was maybe harsh on him earlier. I just feel like he's far too soft. I feel like he's maybe one of the characters that Lutz was alluding to when he said that he wanted the team to have a bit more fight. So I just don't think him and Ashish would give us what's sort of needed in that midfield. Shinnie potentially, but again, I've just not seen enough from him to merit him being in there and kind of try to pull the strings. So I'd be inclined to go for Pavara and Ashish, but I just don't know if Ashish especially maybe needing the rest from the sort of work, because I mean I don't think anyone can doubt the work rate he's put in for the past couple.
Yeah, it's really kind of stepped up in recent weeks. I think, yeah, as you're probably right, any of the changes that are going to come will be in that midfield area, whether it's wholesale changes. Do you think Marko Lazetic returns to the starting 11 over Kevin Nisbet?
No, I think Nisbet will get the nod again. I think he's got his goal. We've said before that he's quite a confidence player. I feel like it'd be maybe slightly naive to pull him out on the back of a goal. I know Lazetic does give us that out ball a little bit.
On that, then, was it naive to take him off when we did last night?
Yes and no. I think with the way the game had gone, I think Lazetic made sense to bring on. It was just a shame that we haven't had the Lazetic that has been sort of, running himself into the ground and showing himself to potentially be a capable player. I feel like it was just unfortunate that it didn't work out. I feel like with the lack of minutes Nisbet's had, he probably was feeling it a little bit come the sort of whatever it was hour mark that he got sort of subbed off. So potentially not, but I would like to see him start at Livy. I think as strange as it sounds, it feels like it's going to be one of those games again where we're not going to be creating too much, and I feel like Nisbet is maybe the one you would want in there for that half chance to come up.
I was a way to ask if you'd make any changes to the defence. Could you look at resting Alexander Jensen, but with Gyamfi potentially made of glass? The whole excuse that seems to come around, you don't play injured players on it, probably sees that we don't make any changes defensively.
Yeah, probably not unless you're putting Gavin Loy in at left wing back. I would certainly keep all the rest of it the same for certain.
Do we need to maybe watch some of the minutes with the fixtures coming up? Obviously, we've maybe spoken about the fact that St Mirren midweek, followed by Kilmarnock before. No, sorry, Dundee. See, told you, getting it wrong already. Strasbourg come to town, but again, where do you sit on that Strasbourg game now? Probably because win it, yes, you keep the hopes faint alive going to Prague, or are you now very much of the viewpoint that these games against Strasbourg and Prague are now free hits?
I feel like we might as well just go all out in them, to be honest. At least give us something fun out of this European adventure. And even if we can come out and say that we've, nicked a point against Strasbourg, I would take it. But I do get the sort of thinking behind, not killing ourselves for what feels like a lost cause at the moment.
Yeah, I just hope that Jimmy treats them also with respect, especially that both games, more so the Prague game, obviously with the amount of fans that are going to be travelling over to that one. But he might then look at the fact that we play Celtic the weekend after as feeling that game's more important than the trip to Prague. But I'm sure we'll get something out of it one way or another, even if it's just a few cheap Czech beers, Phil.
Exactly. If there's nothing else for it, then it's cheap beer to drown the sorrows.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully there's no beer needed to drown sorrows this weekend and the Dons can return to winning ways with 3 points at Livingston, because boy, do we need a bit more positivity on this podcast when we return next week to review the action against the Lions and then preview the trip of St Mirren North to Pittodrie. Thank you very much for tuning in on this Friday evening or over the course of the weekend ahead of the match. Until next week, we'll see you then.